Welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thank you for stopping by my channel again today. I have a crime and coloring episode for you, so get comfy and let's get crafty. The third episode is the Arthur de Steunder story, but first the coloring. I have selected the My Favorite Things Birth Yay stamp set and a piece of Nina Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock. I am going to position the cardstock in the bottom left-hand corner of my Misty stamp positioner, and then I will place all of the images onto the piece of paper. This stamp set has individual characters as well as a group of all of the animal characters stacked together and some other birthday-themed images, cupcakes, balloons, gifts, etc. I will be stamping all of these images out and leaving enough space that I can send this through my scan and cut when I am ready to put these images on cards. I am stamping these images with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and once I have picked up all of the images with the lid to my Misty, I did reposition that paper to make sure it was in the bottom left-hand corner of my stamp positioner. I do intend to go back and restamp these images once the coloring is finished. I did ink up the images 2 times because I did not get super clear images. I don't think I put these stamps away clean, so there was a little bit of leftover ink and fuzz on them. Anyway, and there are a couple of things to note in the coloring. First of all, I started coloring the shadows in from the lightest to the darkest and back again. And secondly, you will notice that there are ink spots all over this paper. After the first crime and coloring episode, I did go through, do a little bit of marker maintenance and overfilled one of my W markers, and it made a huge mess all over everything. Anyway, now that we have the coloring down, let's get into our story. Our story takes place in Arizona. Arizona is the 3rd alphabetical state in the United States, and it was granted its statehood in February of 1912. This story takes place in the fall of 1919. Arthur de Steunder, he also has his name listed as Achille, A-C-H-I-L-L-E, Achille de Steunder, was born March 14th, 1898 in France. His father was Benedict Alphonse de Steunder, and his mother was Helen van de Voorde de Steunder. I'm probably butchering those names. I apologize. It is completely unintentional. The family came to the United States in 1906 and lived in Chicago, Illinois. And Arthur lived under, this is when he started living under the name Achille or Achille. And he married a woman named Alice Pelican on January 14th in 1916 in Indiana. Arthur and his older brother John enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Force and fought in World War I in Canada, in Canada's army. So I'm not sure what happened, what was going on with that. Arthur's service dates were listed as January 11th, 1918 to February 4th of 1919. Arthur received some gunshot wounds to the arm and the leg and was eventually discharged for being medically unfit. It is believed that his parents and his brother had moved to Los Angeles while he was in service. So at the time of his discharge, his parents and his brother had moved from Illinois to California. On to the story. During the evening hours of October 4th, 1919, a shepherd tending a flock of sheep east of Seligman, Arizona, I swear I looked up how to pronounce that, discovered the smoldering, badly burned body of a man behind a small hill located about 100 feet from the Transcontinental Railroad, known at the time as the National Old Trails Road. The following day, the shepherd reported finding this to his employer, who notified the authorities. The Yavapai County lawmen police investigated the scene, and an examination determined that the victim had been shot in the back of the head with a .38 caliber pistol. And then his body was dragged off the road and burned in a large fire in an effort to destroy his body. And although his clothing was nearly destroyed, the body was charred and unrecognizable, the authorities found a Canadian military button with a serial number on it. And so they determined that the unknown male was wearing a Canadian uniform when he was killed. So inside of his puttees, which was a cloth band that was wrapped around the soldier's legs from like their ankle to the knee, it was kind of there to provide support against walking, and also there to, like for when they walked a long time, it was also there to protect against like cold weather. They found $60 stuck in his puttee. Okay, so the killer had missed $60. With no identification available and only the serial number on the button to use for identification, the Arizona authorities wired the Canadian military, the Canadian Identification Bureau, which checked their records and reported that the button with that serial number was issued to Arthur Steunder, or Archie, however he's pronouncing that. According to his Canadian military records, Arthur stated that his family lived in Chicago, but he did not give them any address. Like Canada had no address for his relatives in Illinois. So the Arizona authorities contacted detectives in Chicago, and Chicago authorities ran advertisements on movie screens throughout the city. Okay, talk about early access information, right? They're putting out this advertisement during the movie. Totally weird. So this quickly led to the location of several of Arthur's family members, including his wife, who was in the process of divorcing him. Okay. Mrs. Steunder, Alice, had been attending a movie on October 6th, and the message had flashed across the screen telling her that her husband had been murdered and she needed to go home. When she got home, she was told what had happened and she was questioned. So they're thinking that she's in Chicago and has something to do with a murder that's happening in Arizona because they were divorcing and because you always ask the spouse, right? Let's be honest. First person you ask is always the spouse. Arthur's brother, John, who was probably living in California at the time, had gone to Arizona and was able to identify his brother, Arthur, because of a scar on his arm. Okay. So Arthur's sister-in-law, a brother's wife, had a weird story of how Arthur had recently left Chicago. According to his sister-in-law, Arthur had answered an advertisement about a month before and met a man who offered him $10 a week and expenses to make a car trip through the western United States. So this man wanted Arthur to drive him from Illinois to the western United States, and he was offering to pay him $10 a week plus expenses. Nobody in Arthur's family knew the purpose of the journey. It was like a secret, a mystery, whatever. Arthur and this man spent several days in Chicago getting ready to go and then left. The sister-in-law, Arthur's sister-in-law, said that the family did not like this man. They did not feel comfortable with him. They were particularly put off by his looks because he had a large wine-colored birthmark on the side of his face, and apparently he had kind of an odd-shaped head. Okay. Arthur's sister had met the man and told him not to go on the trip. So his sister and his sister-in-law are telling him, dude, this is weird, don't go. He did not listen, obviously, because this is where we are, right? You should always listen to the women. They know these things. I'm just saying. The man who placed the newspaper ad was named Nishan Martin, and he is a 25-year-old Armenian immigrant from Turkey who had immigrated to the United States. Nishan's declaration of intention for naturalization says he was born May 15, 1893, in Zeytun, Armenia, in Turkey. However, his World War I draft registration says his birth date was May 15, 1894. Okay, so Nishan was educated until he was about 15 years old at Robert College in Constantinople. His brother was a teacher there. He came to the United States in July of 1909 and settled in Boston, Massachusetts, and he worked in leather. He then joined the army and served in World War I, and that was how he was able to become a United States citizen. He served for 6 months and was discharged due to bad health. Now, I could not find any records on exactly what that bad health was. It was apparently pre-existing, not related to the war. Don't know. Okay, so back to Arizona. The authorities in Holbrook, Arizona, came forward after they saw the story of the dead man in the newspaper and said that in late September, so just, a few weeks or few days before this man shows up dead, they had Arthur and Nishan in jail on suspicion of having robbed a store there in Holbrook. But they had released them for lack of evidence. Okay, so here's a little bit of an unfolding as to what this journey was about. They're stealing things, maybe? I don't know. Investigators began to believe that the men had argued over a division of the spoils in their robbery, and Nishan had shot Arthur when he was riding in the passenger seat of the car and then burned him. According to observers in Holbrook, Nishan's face was unforgettable because of his weird-shaped head and the wine stain on his cheek, the wine stain birthmark on his cheek. Okay. So on the night of October 4th, Nishan registered at a local hotel and signed his name as Harydyer. So that was a clear sign to the people in the hotel that he did not know how to spell the alias. They assumed he was trying to spell the name Harry, which typically has 2 R's, right? I don't know. Anyway, Harry, aka Nishan, made an impression on the hotel guests and employees by telling anybody who would listen, and even people who didn't want to, that he had made this journey from Rhode Island in his car alone, and that he could find nobody who wanted to travel with him. Okay, Rhode Island and Chicago are not in the same place, just in case you're forgetting that. Okay, according to witnesses, Nishan's talk around the Kingman Hotel centered all about the impossibility of getting a companion for his long automobile ride across the country. He claimed to have offered to take anyone along who would pay for the fuel and oil for his car. So kind of the opposite of what happened, right? The more he talked, the more the people heard him, wondered why Nishan would have found it so hard to pick up a traveling companion. Now, Arthur's sister-in-law stated that Nishan offered to pay somebody else to drive him, and here he is telling people in Kingman, Arizona, that he could not find anybody willing to come with him for the cost of gas, like it's his vehicle. Okay. Kingman was only 60 miles from where Arthur's body was found, and the authorities calculated that Nishan murdered Arthur sometime on October 4th, possibly in the early morning hours, and then his body was found later that day. Before authorities, kind of realized who was what and going on, Nishan left Kingman and traveled all the way to his home in Yedeman, California, but he was tracked down there by police detectives. So he was arrested on October 15th, just 9 days after Arthur's body was first discovered. Nishan told authorities that he and Arthur had parted ways in Kingman, back in Kingman, Arizona, and Arthur had left for a while and never come back. So Nishan just left. He just left Kingman. Nishan, however, had Arthur's Hudson 6 automobile, Arthur's luggage, and Arthur's military discharge papers, along with a bravery medal. So despite having all of Arthur's things, Nishan claimed that he and Arthur had parted company near a small town about 100 miles east of Prescott, and he had not seen him since. Okay, Kingman is not a small town. I mean, it is, but it's not. And so he's kind of got some details mixed up there. First, they departed, they went their separate ways in Kingman. Now they're 100 miles east of Prescott. All right, so a little bit of a discrepancy in his story. So here comes the fun part. Nishan was being transported by train from California to Arizona, back to Prescott, and he was able to escape. The train stopped near Needles, California, to allow the passengers on the train to eat their dinner in a restaurant that the railroad owned. And since it was an evening time and it was a wide open desert area, the lawmen did not bother to chase him. They just let him go. The sheriff telegrammed local sheriff and lawmen and railroad personnel and local men's groups to be on the lookout for Nishan. And with the help of a local expert tracker, he was very easily located the next morning about 12 miles west of a town near the railroad tracks with bullets in his backside. He claimed to have been shot by members of the Santa Fe train crew, and that was kind of an infamous train robbery crew. The train crew was questioned. They claimed it was an automobile party traveling along the highway near a point where the tracks and the road ran parallel. Okay. It was never actually concluded who shot Nishan, and it seems from newspaper reports that nobody really cared. Nobody was really looking into who had shot this man. Excuse me. So Nishan is captured and taken back to Prescott, and his trial began on March 25th, 1920. So this is nearly 6 months after Arthur's body was found. 4 days later, he was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to hang, and his court-appointed attorney filed an appeal, which was eventually denied, and then by the Supreme Court. And the execution date was set for June 10th of 1921. So it's like a whole year plus that the appeal pushed off his execution. There were other appeals made to other courts, but all of the legal motions were denied, and Nishan's execution was scheduled for Friday, September 9th, 1921. So now we are a full 2 years since the body of Arthur was found. In his final days, Nishan was calm and resigned to his fate. At what was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning that Friday, Nishan was awakened in his death cell at the state penitentiary in Florence, Arizona, and served a hearty breakfast, which he ate. At 5 o'clock, the prison warden, appeared at his cell and read the court's death mandate. Nishan was blindfolded and led to the death chamber, where he mounted the steps to the scaffold, took his place over the trapdoor. Straps were placed around his legs and his arms, and the superintendent of the prison asked Nishan if he had anything to say. And this quote, "I am the happiest man in the world. Best regards to everybody. Goodbye." Odd end quote, but okay. The prison chaplain embraced the man. He gave Nishan a hug, bid him goodbye, and then the hood was placed over his head, and the trap sprung at 5:08. According to the prison physician, it was about 12 minutes before he was pronounced dead, and then he was buried in the prison cemetery. Several weeks after Nishan's death, an Arizona newspaper confirmed that the two men were financing their excursion across the Southwest by robbing businesses along the way. Nishan may have murdered Arthur over a falling out regarding the spoils of their crimes, or maybe even to silence him. So there was a lot of speculation as to why they were driving from Chicago to California. Apparently, Nishan lived there and he was trying to get home. Arthur's wife was divorcing him, so he had nothing better to do, but also his family lived in California. So it's interesting. I wonder if these men had ever met before. Arthur was in the Canadian military during World War I, and Nishan was in the United States military during World War I. I wonder if somewhere along the line they met. I couldn't find any record that they ever did, but I wonder, because they were both discharged for medical reasons, I wonder if some point in time they had ever met, if they'd ever become friendly. Although Arthur's sister says he answered an ad in the paper. So I don't know. I guess they never, I don't know. Maybe that was just their way of finding each other post World War I. I don't know. Such a weird story. There was not a lot of back history on Nishan other than what I could find based on his information on Ancestry and Find a Grave. It didn't even list his parents' names in one place. So, or in either place. All I found was his brother John's name. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, just that whole time frame and record keeping, and Arthur and his family and his parents were both on a census record. So I found his family on a census record. Interesting story, kind of fitting end. Also, I kind of wondered if, because Nishan, when he was captured, having said he was shot by a train robbing crew, I wonder if somewhere in their travels, Arthur and Nishan had crossed paths with this train robbing crew, and him being shot was payback. I don't know. All kinds of things went through my mind when I read this story. Arizona truly was part of the Wild West of the United States. So, interesting story. Let me know, do you have any other conspiracy theories? What could possibly have been their motive for driving cross country? Do you think they met in the military or in the hospital when they were being discharged? Do you think that there's some other nefarious thing going on? There was one record I read that said after Nishan's death, a couple of different military organizations petitioned to have him pardoned based on lack of evidence, but that was also turned down. There was apparently enough evidence to convict him of murdering Arthur, and there's just not a lot of answers to why, other than this string of thefts that was discovered after his death. Now that the coloring is finished and I have zoomed out, you can see what a mess that overfilled marker made on my paper. I have repositioned the colored images back into my MISTI, and I am inking the stamps again with Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I need the outlines of these images to be a nice dark outline so that the Brother Scan and Cut can see the images to cut them out. And sometimes the Copic markers tend to blur that for the Scan and Cut. This is a picture of Arthur de Steunder. I also have a picture of his wife, Alice. And then I found a picture of Nishan Martin. Let me know about the story. Do you have any other conspiracy theories? What do you think is going on with these men? I have left a couple of other videos here for you to watch, as well as a subscribe button. If you have not done so already, I would love it if you subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you are enjoying this series. And as always, have a really fabulous day.